The Last Car, a Sat Stories original. Everyone had made it off the train. At least, that's what they thought. The winter storm had swallowed the Colorado mountains hours earlier. Snow covered the tracks. Wind hammered the trees. And visibility had fallen so low that the engineer of Mountain Line 47 could barely see beyond the train's headlights. There were 73 passengers aboard that night. Families heading home, students returning from college, workers trying to beat the storm. And none of them knew that less than a mile ahead, part of the mountain had begun to move. It happened just after 10 p.m. A section of rock and snow collapsed near the entrance of Black Ridge Tunnel. The engineer saw the debris and hit the brakes. Metal screamed against metal. The train shook violently. Bags fell from overhead compartments. Lights flickered. And finally, the train stopped. Emergency crews arrived quickly. One by one, passengers were moved away from the tracks and taken toward waiting vehicles. Everyone was shaken, but everyone appeared to be safe. Standing several hundred feet away was a man named Jack Mercer. Jack was 41. He wasn't a passenger. He wasn't part of the rescue crew. He had been driving home when the storm forced him onto an old service road overlooking the railway. And Jack knew this railroad better than almost anyone there. For 16 years he'd worked on it. He knew its bridges, its tunnels, its signals, and its trains. Jack watched the evacuated train through the falling snow. Something bothered him. He counted the cars, then counted them again. His expression changed. There should have been 8 passenger cars. He could see only 7. Jack looked toward Black Ridge Tunnel. The entrance was almost invisible through the storm. Then he noticed something else. 2 faint red lights, deep inside the darkness. Jack's stomach dropped. The last passenger car had separated from the train, and it was still inside the tunnel. He ran toward the nearest rescue worker. They checked the passenger list, then the train configuration. Jack was right. 1 car was missing. 7 passengers were unaccounted for. The main tunnel entrance was partially blocked by fallen rock, and bringing heavy equipment through the storm would take time. Time they might not have, because Black Ridge had another problem. Jack remembered it immediately. The center of the tunnel sat lower than both entrances. During heavy snowmelt or flooding, water collected there, and tonight, mountain runoff was already pouring into the drainage system. The missing car was sitting almost exactly at that low point. Jack knew another way inside. Years earlier, maintenance workers had used a narrow service entrance on the opposite side of the ridge. It hadn't been used regularly in years, but if it was still accessible, it could lead him close to the missing car. Jack grabbed a flashlight, emergency equipment, and drove toward the old service road. The storm became worse. Snow whipped across the windshield. Branches covered the road. Eventually, even the truck couldn't continue. Jack got out and went on foot. 20 minutes later, through the trees, he found it. A rusted steel maintenance door built directly into the mountain. Jack pulled it open. Beyond it was nothing but darkness. He stepped inside. The wind disappeared instantly. Now there was only the sound of water. Drip, drip, drip. Jack moved deeper into the tunnel. His flashlight swept across old concrete walls and rusted pipes. Water covered his boots. Then he heard something. Bang! Jack stopped. Another sound. Bang! Bang! It wasn't the mountain. Someone was hitting metal. Jack ran toward it. The sound became louder, and then his flashlight found something enormous in the darkness. The missing passenger car. Its emergency lights were barely glowing. Inside, frightened faces appeared against the windows. Jack had found them. But something was wrong. The car wasn't sitting level. It had rolled backward after separating from the train and stopped on a slight incline. Water was slowly rising around the wheels. Jack reached the nearest accessible emergency exit. The passengers inside were frightened, but alive. There was a father named Michael and his 9-year-old daughter, Emily, a college student, an elderly couple, and 2 other passengers. Jack began helping them out one at a time. Michael came through, then the elderly couple, then the student, then the others. Jack counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He looked back inside. "Where's the girl?" Michael froze. Emily wasn't with them. Jack turned immediately toward the car. Michael tried to follow him, but Jack told him to stay with the others. Then Jack climbed back inside. The emergency lights flickered. "Emily!" Nothing. Jack moved between the seats, empty. He checked beneath them. Nothing. Then, tap, tap, tap! Jack stopped. There it was again. Tap, tap. It came from the far end of the car. Jack followed the sound. Behind a small interior partition, curled into a narrow space, was Emily. She had hidden there when the train stopped. Jack crouched down. She looked terrified. He held out his hand. "Come on! Your dad's waiting!" Emily reached for him. And at that exact moment, the lights went out. Complete darkness. Then came another sound. A deep metallic groan beneath the car. Jack knew exactly what it meant. The car was moving, slowly at first, then faster. The incline behind them led deeper into the tunnel. Jack switched on his flashlight, took Emily's hand, and moved toward the exit. The floor shifted beneath them. Loose objects began sliding toward the rear of the car. Outside, Michael could hear the wheels moving. He shouted for his daughter. Jack reached the exit. The maintenance platform was passing beside them, but the car was beginning to pick up speed. Jack lifted Emily toward the opening. Hands reached for her from outside. Michael grabbed his daughter and pulled her onto the platform. Jack was still inside. The car moved faster. The end of the platform was approaching. Jack grabbed the doorway, pushed himself forward, and jumped onto the edge of the maintenance walkway. 2 passengers caught his arms and pulled him back. Seconds later, the empty passenger car disappeared into the darkness. Everyone stood completely still, listening. The sound of the wheels became quieter and quieter. Then, somewhere deep inside the mountain, a tremendous metallic crash echoed through the tunnel. Silence followed. Michael dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around Emily. She was safe. All 7 passengers were safe. By sunrise, the storm had begun to weaken. Emergency crews reached the service entrance and escorted everyone out of the mountain. Jack walked out last. Snow was still falling. Michael and Emily were waiting near an emergency vehicle. Emily ran toward Jack and hugged him. Jack smiled. It was the first time anyone there had seen him smile all night. One of the rescue workers approached him. There was something he still didn't understand. With dozens of people at the scene, how had Jack been the only person who noticed the missing car? Jack looked back toward the railway. For 16 years, counting those cars had been part of his job. Every train, every night, every departure. But there was something they didn't know. Jack had left the railroad years earlier after an accident, convinced him he never wanted to work around trains again. He had spent years trying to leave that part of his life behind. And yet on the worst night, 7 strangers could have imagined. The thing Jack had tried hardest to forget was exactly what they needed him to remember. As the sun appeared between the Colorado mountains, Jack stood quietly beside the tracks. Behind him, a father was taking his daughter home. And for the first time in years, Jack didn't look at the railroad and see his past. He saw 7 people who still had a future. Sometimes the part of your life you desperately want to leave behind is the very part someone else may one day need you to remember. The end.